We're going to begin today with Russia's attacks on Kiev. Patrick?
Well, the last 24 hours, Russia has hit Ukraine incredibly hard. We'll take a look at this story, and this is really going to shape really how things are playing out with the negotiations with Russia, with Europe, with Trump as well. So Russia's pounding targets in Kiev, and we're going to take a look at this. This is the second biggest aerial attack since the start of the conflict. This is what they're saying here. Let's look at what the Ukrainian reaction is to this missile and drone attack. Ukraine claims Russia has unleashed 629 strikes comprising of 598 drones and 31 missiles. Russia MOD saying it's struck military industrial complex enterprises and military air bases in Ukraine using high precision weapons. And here is the thing that I find much interesting here, Mike, is that Russia's now flying, this is according to the allies or NATO, Russia's flying surveillance drones over routes the U.S. and the Europeans are using to ship military supplies via Germany and probably via Poland as well, and the other countries on the other side of this new Iron Curtain. So that's pretty interesting development.
Absolutely. Now, very much the narrative is that Russia was attacking civilian targets. I mean, what's your thoughts on that claim by the Europeans and the United States?
Well, it's coming first from Zelenskyy himself. Let's look at Zelensky's reaction actually on that note, Mike. Here he is. Obviously, he has moved quickly to change costumes from Washington. He's in his war green here, his best war greens. This is the acting president. We're going to call him the acting president because he is acting like a president, or trying to anyway, but he's not the elected president. He's been out of mandate over a year. So not the democratically elected Zelenskyy. He's saying Russia chooses ballistics instead of the negotiation table. It chooses to continue killing instead of ending the war. And this means that Russia still does not fear the consequences. So he uses the alliteration, this Netanyahu-style alliteration. You can see the first two lines of that. Great public relations speech by Zelenskyy, as usual. And here Zelenskyy has sent his chief of staff and head of the country's Security Council to meet with Trump's team in New York. This is just today, I believe, to discuss security guarantees to be included in any future peace agreement. Well, I got bad news for Zelenskyy, Mike. There's going to be no security guarantees at all. Certainly, that's not going to be front-loading, but that's what the Europeans want to front-load negotiations with. It's what Zelenskyy keeps doing, and it's what the mainstream Western press keeps saying. But that's not what was agreed in Alaska. So I don't think this is going anywhere.
Well, what was agreed in Alaska? Was anything agreed?
Well, at least it was established that there would be a negotiated settlement first, and then a ceasefire would come after that, and that security guarantees would follow long after that. That would be at the treaty signing point of any agreement. And like we're a long way away from that. So
right.
They don't want to deal with the interim steps, which are the essential steps here. And so this is how the Western mainstream press, of course, is portraying this Russian attack. Putin's accused of sabotaging peace efforts after a diplomatic building hit in massive assault on Ukraine. More on that in a moment. EU facility hit. We'll talk more about that in a moment here. But in terms of like sabotaging any peace agreement, here's 7 days ago, Ukraine hit a oil pipeline that supplies energy from Russia to Hungary and Slovakia, but it's a transit pipeline, goes via Ukraine, and I'll bet you that the Ukrainians are getting transit fees from that Russian oil, and they're getting paid by Russia for those transit fees because that's pretty standard, even in the midst of the war. So this was done for two reasons. Hitting this pipeline was done to basically sabotage what was agreed at Alaska between Trump and Russia, and also to, I think, divide Hungary, to divide Europe. So it's kind of a divide and rule tactic by the handlers of Ukraine and Ukraine themselves. Who are the handlers? Well, you've got the British, you've got the Germans, and you've got other sort of European actors behind the scenes that are sort of egging the Ukrainians on, probably our CIA and the British MI6. Deeply involved in all of that. But again, dividing the Europeans, creating this Central European bloc that seems to not be with the program and seems to be pro-Russian. This is setting the stage for something that we'll show briefly. But Hungary's foreign minister is saying that this missile strike on the Druzhba pipeline this infrastructure is another attempt to drag Hungary into the war. So this is the way the Hungarians are looking at this right now. So not only that, Mike, but the Transcarpathian Hungarians in Ukraine, as we know, after World War I, Hungary lost most of its territory.
Right.
But there's Hungarians, ethnic Hungarians in Ukraine, and they're not being treated very well. Plus, this conscription, there's accusations that they're being conscripted at higher rates than Western Ukrainians, for instance. So they look at this as basically a Hungarian issue or a Hungarian world issue. So this is a real emotional issue within the government in Budapest and the people more broadly. And I know, having been to Budapest last November, and that was a very important issue that the deputy foreign minister brought up to some of the members of the press who I was with at the time. So this is a serious issue. They really think that Ukraine is really doing provocations here to try to create another front or more tension to take the focus off of what they should be focusing on, which is winding this conflict down here. But look at the war of words here. This is the Hungarian foreign minister here, Peter Szijjártó, and he's basically saying that Zelenskyy has used Ukraine's national holiday to threaten Hungary. We firmly reject his intimidation. We regard sovereignty, territorial integrity, including energy infrastructure here, as fundamental values of international politics. So, and here is the Ukrainian foreign minister's response to this. I will reply in a Hungarian manner. So totally condescending, slightly racist. And he's saying, you don't need to tell the Ukrainian president what to do, say, or when. He is the president of Ukraine, not Hungary. Hungary's energy security is in your own hands. Diversify and become independent from Russia, like the rest of Europe. Wow. So they're really talking almost like adversaries here. And you have to remember that, well, we'll talk about the European Union and Ukraine's membership later, Mike, but this is war talk between Kiev and Hungary. And I don't...
So am I reading this right? You're suggesting that they're splitting Slovakia and Hungary away in this way because, of course, they have been sort of naysayers to quite a lot of this over the past couple of years.
Yep.
So the effort is to create this much stronger British, French, German axis within around which the coalition of the willing gather in the EU. Is that what's going on?
Yes, and the Orban government and Robert Fico in Slovakia, they're at odds with Brussels. So Brussels is already sort of declaring them persona non grata, threatening to take their voting rights away because they're not on board with the Ukraine program and so forth. So there's already that split happening. So it looks like the intelligence services and Ukraine, the Western intelligence services in Ukraine, are trying to drive a wedge through these sort of dissident governments in Central Europe. So, and perhaps open up a new front. I don't think that's out of the realms of possibility at this point. You have to remember Zelenskyy and Kiev and Europe are desperate. If Russia is seen to win this or come to a peace deal, it's devastating for not just NATO, Mike, but the EU itself.
Right. So, as Patrick says, with this attack on Kiev, we've seen the typical response in the British and the Western legacy media. But just to highlight one example of this, this is The Sun. The horror moment: a Russian missile hit and damaged the British Council building in Kiev during the attacks that were going on. So that's how British legacy media reporting it. They're reporting that the attacks killed at least 21 people, and of course that it hit the British Council building, but also an EU building. In fact, it was a third building that was actually struck, and the damage to the British Council and the EU buildings was pretty limited, as we'll see in a second. But as I say, that didn't stop The Sun from producing this video, and as you can see on screen, the implication of this was that this was a direct attack on Britain and the EU. And of course, this supports the narrative of security guarantees being required.
It does. But the British Council building, it might be an integral part of British soft power, but it's not sovereign territory. In other words, it's not an embassy or a consulate. So, I mean, it doesn't really fall under that. And, a lot of countries would have evacuated some of these facilities already. I mean, why wouldn't you if it's at risk of being hit or something like that? Unless, of course, there's activities going on there that you absolutely need to keep going because it's part of, what the many accusations made against some of these NGOs and soft power institutions.
Well, let's just look at some of the allegations that are made. So here is the FSB's flag here, but this is the Russian intelligence agency. And back in June, they made a comment on Britain and the British Council, which I thought it was worth bringing in at this point, Patrick. So let's just have a look at it. They said in their statement that Britain is the main source of global crises, a provocateur and instigator of wars. London organises coups, weakens not only its geopolitical enemies, but also its closest allies, pits nations against each other, and prevents the resolution of bloody conflicts that it unleashed. I'm finding it very hard to disagree with anything in that comment.
We've certainly reported on quite a bit of this. So, there is meat on the bones of these accusations.
Indeed. So let's have a look and see what they said about the British Council themselves. They said the British Council is a hostile organisation that actively participates in the operations of the British Special Services, aimed at undermining the sovereignty and security of the Russian Federation, as well as those of other sovereign states. And again, I'm struggling to disagree with that. And then they go on to say that various projects are being implemented by the British Council to systematically discredit the domestic and foreign policies of the Russian Federation. Well, okay, I wanted to remind myself exactly what the situation is with the British Council. How much money does it get from, for example, the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office? So let's have a look at that. So here is the FCDO spending website that the UK column has produced. And just as a reminder, this is an effort to make the data which the Foreign Office produces more accessible and more obvious to people. So let's see what this website has to say. Well, if we look at the top 20 recipients of FCDO money, which is on that front page, the British Council is third on the list, to the tune of £1.6 billion over the course of the time frame that we're talking about with this website.
So about the last 7 years.
Well, let's just have a look at this in a little bit more detail. So there's the graph. So it begins in December 2017. And what we can see there is that they receive around £20 million per month from FCDO, with some spikes of up to £100 million per month. And right there, Patrick, if we put a ring round it, is a spike of just under £100 million in February, March 2022. What else happened around that time?
Well, that was the outbreak of the Ukraine-Russia conflict.
Right.
That February 24th,
so 2022. Isn't that a coincidence?
One would say yes. One would say that's an anomaly on the graph. I can't imagine that those two things would have anything to do with each other, though.
Anyway, those are the allegations of the Russian Federation, and you can take those as you see fit. I, as I say, struggle to find anything incorrect about what the FSB said there. If that makes me a mouthpiece for the Putin regime, well, that's well and good, but that's how it looks to me.
Well, everything that they have said about the British Council is exactly what everything, including scholars and journalists, have been saying about USAID, this institution, this instrument of, quote, soft power and smart power by the United States as a CIA cutout organization. So one could look at the British Council in roughly the same way, a soft power or smart power outlet, NGO, and an extension of British intelligence, like the USAID constellation is an extension of American intelligence. I mean, I don't see the problem in looking at these things that way.
And what about the allegation that I've seen that the British Council was somehow performing some kind of coordination role in Ukraine?
I have not looked close enough at the exact allegations there, but certainly it would be interesting, and it wouldn't be unusual. And like I said, USAID have played the exact same role. There's also been accusations about the OECD, another international organization as well, involved in giving targeting information out during from the front lines and during breaking the Minsk peace process, basically, in Donbass. Another discussion, but not unusual.
But so anyway, an EU building was damaged as well, and Ursula was outraged, absolutely outraged. So let's just have a listen to what she had to say.
I'm outraged by the attack on Kyiv, also hitting our EU offices. This was the deadliest drone and missile attack on the capital since July. And as you can see behind me on the screen, it was an attack also on our delegation. I just spoke with our deputy ambassador, and I'm relieved that none of our staff were harmed. Last night's attack struck in close proximity of the diplomatic mission, the representation of our union. 2 missiles hit in a distance of 50 meters of the delegation within 20 seconds. And this is another grim reminder of what is at stake. This is why we are keeping maximum pressure on Russia. That means tightening our sanctions regime. We will come forward soon with our 19th package of hard-biting sanctions. And in parallel, we are advancing the work on the Russian frozen assets to contribute to Ukraine's defense and reconstruction.
So, hard-biting sanctions and stealing Russian frozen assets. That's the response.
Stealing, yeah, that's Ursula. Yeah, I mean, where's this righteous indignation for what Israel is doing in Gaza? I mean, seriously. By the way, they keep saying that Ukraine is at war and that the Ukrainians are at risk. Why do they have a mission in Kiev? Why don't they move it to Lvov, which is completely out of range of pretty much any of the hostilities? Why? I don't understand. If you care about your staff and you claim that this is a war zone, why are you, still keeping your building staffed in right next to a target that could be a military target? Because she wasn't hit directly. She's claiming it was an attack on the EU mission. It wasn't. It was ancillary damage, wasn't it? Maybe
you want justification for security guarantees.
Well, yeah, of course. That she's advancing that argument. Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely. So yeah, that's interesting, Mike. So where is Europe on Ukraine? Well, let's just take a look at this. So, and this is Politico here. Grasping at straws, Europe floats Ukraine-Russia buffer zone in a push for peace. So they're still at it, basically pushing these ideas here. They're grasping at straws, says Jim Townsend, former Pentagon official who oversaw Europe and NATO's policy under the Obama administration here. Totally unrealistic, this idea of flooding the zone with European troops, a coalition of the willing, doing this outside of NATO. Technically, so there's no Article 5 tripwire. I mean, it's just another workaround that's just not practical, not going to happen. Well, actually, if they push on this, it's going to probably create a huge security crisis for Europe, because Russia is obviously not going to respect what Europe's doing there. And so here's the nub of the issue, however, Mike. The Russians are not afraid of the Europeans, says Jim Townsend, former Obama administration official. And if they think that a couple of British and French observers are going to deter them from marching into Ukraine, then they're wrong. So that's from the Democratic appointee side. They're normally pretty hawkish on these matters here. But on the issue of Europe, so here's where Europe's at right now. They're still dangling this Ukrainian membership into the EU. And here's the Hungarian foreign minister here. And obviously, you're not allowed to see this if you're in Britain or France because it's RT. So what we're showing you here is statements from the Hungarian foreign minister, which you're not allowed to read in Western Europe because it's too dangerous. And your governments are concerned about you falling under the spell of the sorcery spell of Russian disinformation. Okay, so here's what he says. Now, this is important because Europe needs to understand this. If someone realistically and rationally observes Ukrainian accession to the EU, what impact it would have, then you can see that this would be the coup de grace to the European Union. In other words, this would be the death knell for the EU. So there's a lot of people that are cheering this on, actually. I think quietly, maybe Hungary would like to see this happen because they would like to see the European Union possibly disintegrate. The political union anyway, not the common market, of course. But Brussels would have to redirect practically all EU financial resources towards supporting Kiev, the ultimate welfare state. Here, while, quote, much of lower quality agriculture products would destroy European agriculture, big complaint, especially in Poland, and the, quote, Ukrainian mafia would roam freely in Europe, as well as the Nazis of the hundreds of thousands of radicalized Ukrainian nationalists and Nazis that would probably be homeless at that point. I don't know what would happen. But so this is from the Hungarian side here. So it's a non-starter. By the way, NATO membership they don't have to give Russia guarantees because Hungary and Slovakia would never vote. They need unanimous vote, right, for NATO membership.
Right.
They're not going to get it. There's probably 3 or 4 NATO members that will not vote for Ukraine. Full stop. So it's not going to happen. And by the looks of this, EU membership is hugely problematic. What a financial drain this would end up being on Europe. They require complete entitlement and welfare support on every aspect of their political economy. I mean, forget it. It's not going to happen. But they're going to keep dangling this because that's the dream, isn't it? Euromaidan.
So just to finish this segment off, Patrick, what does Russia have to do before the West admits defeat?
Probably win so decisively on the battlefield that they'll have to scramble to freeze the lines.
Are they not doing that already?
That's what Alaska was all about. I personally, I think the Ukrainian front lines collapsing in so many key areas that I think that's what pushed Trump. And the Europeans were totally behind Trump. Did you notice that? Oh, just completely. They were like school kids there in the Oval Office, just waiting to see what Daddy is going to say. But because they know that the U.S. is the only chance they have to potentially freeze the front lines. Because if they don't, Russia's just going to keep rolling on. And quite frankly, they're going to keep rolling on now in lieu of any sort of serious political negotiations. It's just going to carry on. That's probably where it's going to end up.
Right.
I hope it doesn't trigger an irrational reaction from some of the hawks in Europe. That would be unfortunate, but yet we wait.
Indeed. Okay, let's move on. If you like what the UK column does, you'd like to support us, there's a big blue button on the front page of the website that takes you to the page where we list the options. You can make a donation, or you can join as a member, or you can pick something up from the shop. But in any case, we do absolutely need your support to share material from the website. And we do prefer that you share it from the website and not from other places on social media to get around the algorithm as best that we can. Like to mention once again, the On Location event, which is taking place on Saturday, the 18th of October, 2025. Andrew Wakefield is going to be speaking at that. Of course, we will remind you again, you get access to his film, Protocol 7, if you are an in-person ticket holder, or you get hold of a ticket to the live stream. Those are available as well on the website. And Tess Laurie speaking, more speakers to be announced. Tonight's weekly banter with Jerm, Charles, and myself goes out at 7 p.m. tonight. Please join us for that. And a reminder that Alex Thompson and Charles's discussion on why did the Church of England go wrong that went out 1 p.m. yesterday is on the website now. So if you didn't see that yesterday, please have a look at that discussion.